I'm Emma Cantor, Deputy Children's Book Editor at PW, and my guest today for Books on Tap Live is author Christina Forrest, who's going to be talking about her new YA novel, Now That I've Found You. The book is out from Macmillan Children's Publishing Group on October 25th, August 25th,
Yeah.
and what is time? And Macmillan is sponsoring this event. So thanks for joining me, Christina.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I have a few announcements for everyone watching at home. First, we're giving away a limited number of signed copies of Christina's new book, Now That I've Found You. So to sign up for a chance to win, go to publishersweekly.com/forest, and that link is also in the comment section on Facebook and YouTube. We also invite viewers to submit their own questions for Christina via the comment section on Facebook and YouTube. And during the last portion of the interview, we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Finally, to stay in the loop about future events in the series, go to publishersweekly.com/booksontap-live and sign up there. Now on to the Q&A. So where are you joining us from, Christina?
Brooklyn.
Very nice. And in addition to being an adventure set in the city and Brooklyn, Now That I've Found You is in some ways a love letter to movies.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, could you give us an elevator pitch or a log line for this story?
Yes. So Now That I Found You is about an up-and-coming actress named Evie who is blacklisted from Hollywood. And she thinks the only way that she can make a comeback is if she makes an appearance with her very famous grandmother. And about a week before she and her grandmother are due to attend this very big event, her grandmother disappears. And the last person to have seen her is a very cute musician named Milo, who you can see on the cover of the book. And he and Evie team up to go on a wild search throughout New York City to look for her grandmother.
It really is a delightful page-turning read. What gave you the idea for the concept?
So my ideas always come to me in very weird ways. Either when I'm asleep, I get a lot of my ideas when I'm dreaming, or when I'm in the shower. So 2 summers ago, when I first got the idea for this book, I'm a visual thinker. And so a lot of the time I get just like pictures or images in my head. And then I sort of ask myself, well, what's that about? And so I sort of got this image of this boy and this girl standing in front of a mansion. And the mansion wasn't anywhere explicit. It wasn't in New York, but the girl was very well dressed. And the boy was just sort of laid back with like a t-shirt and jeans. And I knew the vibe between them, that there was some sort of confusion, like something was wrong and they were trying to figure it out. And that they had a connection to whoever lived in the mansion. It all sounds very vague, but in my head, I was like, what is this? I need to figure it out. And that eventually became the plot for Now That I Found You. And I also have personally just really love old Hollywood, and I love mysteries. I first pitched this book to my editor as Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead meets Where'd You Go, Bernadette, but like a rom-com somehow, and she bought it. So here we are.
So it was a successful pitch.
Yeah.
I love that the ideas came to you first as images. That's so fitting for a book about movies.
Yeah.
So in the book, Evie's grandmother and role model is the famous actress Evelyn Jones, and she got her big break in a 1970 movie called Every Time We Meet. That was one of the first blockbuster rom-coms or romances to star a Black couple. Is that character of Evelyn inspired by a real-life performer or someone you know from your life?
Yeah, so Evelyn is sort of inspired mostly by Diane Carroll, who was a big Black actress, sort of around the time that I imagined that Gigi would be very popular. She was also loosely inspired by Diana Ross, not in terms of Diana Ross's music career. She was also an actress, but just how iconic and big Diana Ross was, particularly for the Black community. And then I was also thinking about actresses like Audrey Hepburn and Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor, these women who sort of have this iconic status in Hollywood. And I was like, well, what if I wrote a character like that, but I made her Black? Those are sort of like the actresses who inspired Gigi, but she on a deeper level, she was mostly inspired by my own grandmothers, who are very wise and very beautiful and classy women who raised me. So it's a combination between the two.
So speaking of grandmotherly wisdom, Evie looks to Evelyn for guidance and confidence, both off screen and on screen. How do you see their two characters being similar but also different, and what do they learn from each other?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that Gigi, or Evelyn, she knows who she is. She's 70 years old, and so she's lived a long life, and she has learned lots of lessons. So she's very firm in who she is. While Evie's young, she's 18. She is just on the brink of stardom, and she has all these ideas about what she wants her life to be, especially based on the opinions of others. And so her journey is all about learning who she is and what she wants on her own terms. I think that Evie and Gigi are similar because they both really love fashion. That's like a very basic way that they're similar. But they're both very closed off people. And they only let you in if you give them a reason to. And they know how to hold a grudge. I feel like in a way, Evie learned that from Gigi a little bit. But I also think that they are sort of the kind of people who are like sort of cynics, but they want to be proven wrong about love and relationships and how close you can let someone into your life.
They're both such compelling characters in that way. Also curious, looking at this time in Hollywood, when the industry is confronting its own lack of diversity on screen and behind the camera, and the Oscars So White movement is really gaining momentum. How do you hope that your book will help move the needle on the representation front?
I hope to see more, particularly YA romances with Black characters. I think, every time I look at the publisher's weekly children's bookshelf, book announcements, I see more and more every week. And so I'm just trying to fill a gap that, there wasn't a lot of books, there weren't a lot of YA romances with Black characters when I was a teenager. And so, I'm just trying to fill that gap and write some more. And I know that there are other people, other authors who are doing that work as well. And I think that as time goes on, there will only be more of us. And that's the hope.
Absolutely. And at first glance, the title of the book, Now That I've Found You, refers to Evie's search for her grandmother. But we find over the course of the story that other meanings open up. Could you talk about the theme of discovery that runs throughout?
Yeah. So the title works in a few ways. Like you said, it's like on the very front level, Now That I Found You, you can see from the jacket copy that this is a story about a girl who's legitimately searching for her missing grandmother. But it also speaks to her relationship with Milo, because, he was not someone that she was expecting to meet or to become a part of her journey. And so she finds him. But I think internally, the big journey is that Evie along the way finds herself, which is, a staple in coming of age YA books. So it's working in all those kinds of ways.
And speaking of Milo, the chemistry between him and Evie is so palpable, and it's just a joy to follow and see it develop. What do you think gives him that X factor?
Well, I think it's always interesting to me as a reader and a writer to write relationships where there's some kind of like push and pull. Milo is just like wears his heart on his sleeve. Everything is just out there for him. He's a musician. He writes love songs. He like, I don't think it's a huge spoiler that like, eventually he like sings to her. And Evie is kind of just like, no, I'm not here for romance. I'm trying to get my career back on track. I'm legitimately looking for my grandmother. All of whatever it is that you have to offer is, I don't need that right now. And I think that creates a very fun dynamic between them because as a reader, you're waiting to see Evie's walls come down to let Milo in. As far as the X Factor, I don't know. I think Milo's really charming. Obviously, I'm biased because I wrote him, but I tried my best to make him like as swoon-worthy as possible. And whenever, so far from readers, everyone loves him the best. So I feel like I did a good job.
Absolutely. And what draws you to the romance genre, not just as a writer, but as a reader or viewer?
I ask myself this question. People ask me that a lot in my life, like why I love romance novels, romantic movies. I think that on the reader level, something that is so nice about reading romance novels is that you know what the ending is. You know that these two characters are supposed to get together and there's going to be a happily ever after or a happy for now. But what's so exciting is knowing what the ending is going to be, but seeing how the author gets them there. And I don't know, I've always just been kind of fascinated by relationships and the way that people relate to each other. And, love is such an interesting topic for me because, you sort of wake up and you choose to be with the same person every day. And like, well, what goes into that? And I think I'm always trying to figure that out, which is why I keep writing romance novels. But yeah, it's just exciting. I think it's something really fun about it.
Well, Evie's adventures in the book made me really nostalgic for life in the city pre-pandemic, going to late night clubs,
Yes.
even sitting on the subway at full capacity, being packed in,
Yeah.
late night diner runs, all of that. What do you think makes New York a quintessential backdrop for romance and adventure?
Well, it's sort of like all the things you said. There's so much opportunity in New York for adventure and different places, like on the subway, like you said, in that particular scene, the subway is at full capacity. So Evie and Milo are in the middle of like this, they're kind of having a bit of a tiff, little argument, but they're like right up in each other's faces because the subway is so packed. And so there's so much opportunity in New York to create these spaces where these characters are and, forced proximity or, all the kind of like tropey things that you can think of. But I also just think that New York is a lot of fun. There's a lot of different ways to get places. In this book, they go from the Upper West Side to Harlem to the Lower East Side to Crown Heights in Brooklyn to Williamsburg. And it was just a way to make the story very mobile. They're not stationary for very long at any point in the story. And, when I'm writing, I'm trying to think of ways to keep it exciting for me because I'm the one who has to spend the most time with the book. So I'm always thinking like, well, what can I do to make this more interesting to me and therefore more interesting for the reader? And I think New York just it's just has so much opportunity for that.
As a New Yorker yourself, are there any spots or any activities that you really miss right now while we're still in the middle of COVID?
Yes, I miss Union Square. My friends and I have this thing where we will go to, I think it's the chocolate bar. We call it the chocolate bar, but I'm actually not sure what the name of the real restaurant is. We go to the chocolate bar, then we go to the Strand, then from the Strand, we go to we walk across Union Square to go to Barnes and Noble, then from Barnes and Noble, we go to Books and Wonder. We just like do like a bookstore trip, and then we sit in Union Square and just talk. And I really miss that particularly. I miss going into bookstores and not, having to wear a mask. I miss Central Park. I miss all the parks. I miss sometimes I miss being on the subway only because that's where I got a lot of reading done and where I did a lot of listening to podcasts. Now I do that less because, I don't have those commuting times anymore. So those are some of the things that I miss.
I think we all miss that on some level,
Yeah.
wherever we are. And now, with so much life being on the screen, it makes me think of how social media is handled in the book.
Mhm.
Both Milo and Evie are up and coming performers of their own, and they learn both the good and the bad of going viral. Why did you include that aspect?
That came about kind of organically. I don't think that was in the first draft, if I'm remembering correctly. I drafted a lot of this actually after my first book came out. And at the time, I was dealing, for the first time, I was dealing with responses from people who had read the book, be it online or in person at book festivals. And so you're just getting a lot of opinions about your work. And I was struggling to focus on writing Now That I Found You because I was thinking so much about what people were saying about my first book. And so I had to say to myself, like, you kind of have to close everything out and just focus on what it is that you're doing. And I wanted, somehow that subconsciously became Evie's thing as well. She's so a little bit obsessed at the beginning of the novel with what people think about her and what they say about her. And she's constantly checking her notifications. And, when the rug is pulled out from underneath her, she has no idea what to do. And so she sort of has to look within herself to find her confidence and to know that her opinion about herself is what matters the most. For Milo, I wanted it to be like, most people who are not signed, or most musicians and things like that who are not signed to major record labels, have a lot of notoriety through social media. That's the way that so many of them are discovered. And so I was like, well, how can this band, who they like are based in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, how would people know who they are? Like, if Milo's out in person, out in public with Evie, how would somebody recognize him? And I was like, oh, well, duh, they'd like see a video of him on Instagram or something like that. So that was just a very easy option. But I don't think that Milo, he's not as big on social media in a personal way as Evie is. If it has nothing to, if it's not about the band, he's like not concerned about it. So they're different in that way.
Let's talk more about the cover, which has both of those characters front and center. And I think it really captures the spirit of the book. Who was the designer?
Cassie Gonzalez is the designer for the cover for Now That I Found You. And she also did the cover for I Want to Be Where You Are. And this cover was illustrated by, the first one was illustrated by Alice Cabal. And Now That I Found You was illustrated by Kat Goodlow. Got very lucky.
So behind the scenes in the book, Now That I Found You, Carrie is Evie's devoted manager, and she's also in some ways her closest friend. She's right there for all of the ups and downs, both personal and professional. I'm wondering, could you tell us a bit about your team at Macmillan and how they helped support you through the bookmaking process?
It's funny about Carrie. She actually was not in the first draft of the book. I realized that Evie she has her issues with friends, but I realized that she needed a female in her life, like a woman in her life who was young enough to sort of be friendly with her, but also to be in this leadership position on her team. And so that's where Carrie sort of came from. But Carrie is loosely inspired by my publicist, who's named Brittany, who works at Macmillan, who is young, but she is so professional and very sweet, but like very on top of it. And when I was thinking about having a manager character in Evie's life, I was like, you know what, Brittany would be really great for Evie. And so then I kind of just was thinking about her personality, and then I came up with Carrie. But other than Brittany, there's Cassie, who designs my covers, and my editor, Nikisha Telfer, Teresa, who works on my marketing. And, there's just, the school and library team is also really lovely, but there are so many people at Macmillan whose names I don't know, and people who I don't speak with because, I just didn't have the opportunity to, but like, managing editorial and production and sub-rights and sales. There are a lot of people I don't know because it really does take a village to make every single book.
That's so true. And I love reading the acknowledgments for that reason.
Yeah.
To hear about how everyone contributed. And for that same reason, I'm someone who stays for the credits at the end of a lot of movies. I know most of my friends don't. They'll, be gathering their coats and their popcorn, heading out the theater. I'm like, oh no, I want to see who the line producer was.
Yeah.
So both of your novels, I noticed, star talented Black women pursuing their creative dreams. Chloe, in your first book, is a dancer, and now Evie, we have, is a performer on the rise. Can you talk about the importance of featuring Black creativity and joy in your work?
So I think on a personal level, the reasons that Chloe is a ballerina and Evie is an actress, I mean, they're like kind of selfish. Like, I wanted Chloe to have this desire. I wanted her to be single-minded in this goal, so much so that it would drive her to go on a road trip behind her mom's back. Like, who does stuff like that, But she had to love it so much that that's what she would do. And I wanted her to be interested in something that was physical, so that when I was writing the story, the reader could see her physically moving, and her relation to how much she loved ballet and just the movements of her body. I was really drawn to that. And also I was a ballerina, so I didn't have to do any research. So that's why I made Chloe a ballerina. And I always have liked Hollywood, or old Hollywood particularly, and I would watch like True Hollywood Story when I was younger about, the lives of celebrities, and I've always just sort of been intrigued by that. And I've read books about famous people, or famous teens particularly, and I had never read one about a Black character, and I was kind of just like, I'm just gonna make Evie famous and run with it, and that was the best decision I made for this book because it, made it a lot more interesting. But on a broader level, Black people aren't a monolith. We are interested in all the things, and we do all the things. And so, I don't think much of it to make Chloe a ballerina, or to make Evie an actress, or for Milo to be a musician, because I don't personally know any famous Black actresses, but they exist. It's just like Black musicians exist, and Black ballerinas too.
In terms of your own creative journey, you mentioned dance. At what point did you know you wanted to pursue writing for young readers?
I guess like around my senior year, of high school, I was deciding between writing and dancing and what I wanted to pursue. And I kind of fell out of love with ballet a little bit. I liked to write more. And so I went to college to get a writing degree, and I took creative writing class. And one of my professors, I wrote a story. My first workshop was a short story about this 12-year-old boy who was trying to find a date to like a dance or something. And my professor encouraged me to take a creative writing course that was specific for writing for children. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I took that class, and then that professor told me to take a YA creative writing specific class. And that's, all I had really been reading at the time was YA. And so it sort of felt kind of natural to then try to pursue it professionally.
And what was your path like from there to publishing your first book?
So when I graduated from undergrad, I went to grad school. I went to the New School's Writing for Children MFA program. And I was there for 2 years. And when I graduated, I sort of had 3 projects that I was seriously, I was like, this degree costs a lot of money. So I need to, try to take this seriously to get published. That's what I came here for. And I laid out the ideas that I had, and I Want to Be Where You Are was one of them. And I felt like that was the strongest idea. So I drafted it, and I sent it to my critique partners, who are some of the people that I met in grad school, and they gave me notes, and I revised based on those notes. And then I queried. It's very traditional. I queried. I got an offer representation from my agent, Sarah Crow, and then she and I revised for a little bit, and then we took it out on submission, and then I got an offer from Macmillan. And so that's how I Want to Be Where You Are came to the world.
I saw in your bio that you also work in children's publishing. What is your role?
I work in subsidiary rights for kids. Yeah.
And how do you find balancing those two aspects of your professional and artistic life?
I mean, honestly, it depends on the time of year. Depends on what's happening. If I have a book coming out, if there's like something like a fair happening on, my day job side, sometimes it can feel hectic. But I really, when it comes to writing specifically, if I'm on a deadline, I have to stick to a schedule. Otherwise, the book just won't get written. And so now I'm just really used to that. And I outline as well. And I think that makes it a little bit easier for me, because when I sit down to write, I know what scene I'm writing, and it's very easy for me to set attainable goals. And it's worked so far, so I'm just trying to stick to it.
And have you found that the pandemic has affected your day-to-day life with work and writing?
I actually have more time to write because I know, weird, right? Because I'm not commuting. I mostly write in the evenings. And so, when, during normal times, I would be on the subway during rush hour. And that's just stressful in and of itself. And I would get home and I'd be like, oh my God, now I have to write. Like, it would take me a long time to gear myself up to do it. But now, it's very easy for me to log off, go for a long walk, come back and say, okay, from 7 to 9, I'm going to write. And then it's just so easy to bang it out. I think because I don't have the stress of a commute. I think that's the biggest thing.
So a silver lining in
a little bit, I know.
A way.
Yeah.
With so many bookstores and libraries still closed, have you been able to still connect with fans online or in other ways?
Yeah, mostly just through Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, that's the main way.
Well, on that note, connecting with fans, I think now is a good time to pivot to answering some questions from readers. We have a lot of great ones that came in.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So first, Judith M. Bergeron says, I love that you started out wanting to be a dancer. Were you exposed to the arts a lot growing up? And if so, was it community-based or family-based?
I was. I guess I would say it was more community-based. I joined, before I started taking ballet classes, I actually joined my school's dance team. And that was sort of my entry point into dance. And I really liked it. And then I was like, Mom, I think I want to take ballet. And she's like, okay. So it was definitely community based. And also my best friends and I used to dance in the 4th of July parade every summer, and we would come up with our own routines and stuff. So it was just a way for us to be active, and, like learned leadership. And we were like 8. We learned leadership things at a very young age. So I definitely would say it was more community based. But in terms, my mom always took us to like the movies, which is like a very basic way to have an entry into the arts. But it was a way for me to see stories. And my grandmother was a teacher. And so before we even started, pre-K or kindergarten, we were always reading. She had a huge bookshelf. And so we had tons of books, and we were always reading or being read to. And so I think that I was able to appreciate story from a very young age, and it stuck with me, obviously.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of support for your creative interests at a young
Definitely.
age, which is so important.
Mhm.
Sarah Hall asks, has your performance background influenced your writing at all?
Yes, in a way. I try to pay a lot of attention to the rhythm of my sentences in the same way that you try to pay attention to rhythm when you're dancing. I read a lot of my drafts. I read every single draft out loud because I'm always trying to catch when you're reading something on the page, you might not catch it, but when you're listening, you're like, oh, that sounds so weird. That's so clunky. So in that way, yes. And I also think, whenever I have to do something like this, or in person, when I have to speak to a crowd, I'm used to standing up in front of a lot of people. So it's less like nerve wracking, I guess.
And Lisa L. is wondering, how did writing this new book compare to writing your debut?
It was it was hard. It was hard. With your debut novel, I guess it depends on the situation, but usually when you're writing your debut novel, if you're writing it because you want to query, you want to get an agent, you're writing it on your own schedule, your own time frame. And so I just kind of went with the flow with the first book. But because I got a 2-book deal, the minute I started writing Now That I Found You, I was on a deadline, and I wasn't used to that. And I wasn't able to like sit and let the thoughts come to me and let them percolate in, the way that you want them to. And I had a lot of false starts with this book. In the original version, Evie was not even famous. It was just she had a brother. It was so different. But once I finally found my footing, it was kind of just off to the races. But I had a lot of false starts in the beginning. It was not fun.
Wow. Well, I think it's fair to say that none of that is apparent in this,
Thank
in
you.
this book. Elizabeth would like to know, how much of your personal teenage years do you put into your books?
So I feel like Chloe in my first book has a little bit more of like on a day-to-day. Because Chloe is an everyday girl. She goes to high school. She has her best friend. She lives in the suburbs. She has a crush on the boy who lives across the street. And she's a dancer. And so that's very much in line with kind of what my everyday life was like in high school. Evie, she grew up homeschooled. Her grandmother's famous. Her parents are like these indie documentary makers. She has had a very different life from what I had. But I think that on a deeper level, teen me and Evie and Chloe, you're at that age when you're just trying to figure yourself out and who you want to be and who you want to be in relation to the world. And I also think that there is like something really special when you meet someone, you're kind of just like falling in love for the first time, and all like the feelings that come along with that. I love writing those scenes, and I try to think back to the way I felt, to the way my friends felt in high school when those things were happening. So I try to draw on emotions, I guess.
Marjorie Light asks, what books would you recommend as a YA must-read?
I always blank on this question.
We can come back to it.
Just YA in general. Gosh, yeah. Can we come back to it? I'm gonna think about that.
Back to your own book, Allison Troutman is wondering, which scene was your favorite to write?
The last scene, which I cannot talk about because it's a huge spoiler, but I think people will know what I mean when they get there.
More incentive to read it.
Yeah.
Amanda Gawthorpe has an interesting question. What type of research did you do for the movie aspect of the book? Was it just a lot of viewing?
Yes.
Nice.
I was kind of just thinking about movies that I really loved. And I guess I was kind of just thinking about actors. Like I was thinking about Cicely Tyson and Dorothy Dandridge and Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. And I was kind of just thinking like, well, what these like super suave and charming Black actors, like what is the ideal role for me in my mind for them? And that's sort of how I came up with the movie plot of the movie within the book for Every Time We Meet. And I also knew that I needed the plot of the movie to be in line with Evie and Milo's journey. I purposely was trying to make it symbolic so that, all the different points hit when they were supposed to. I did not have to do any like hardcore research though, because I just watch a lot of movies. So
sounds good to me. Yaritza Santana asks, where is your favorite place to write?
I don't know if I have a favorite place. I miss writing at the coffee shop around the corner from me. But I kind of just write wherever. I feel like because I'm so busy all the time, I've been forced to have to write wherever I am, on the train, bus, in my parents' house, here in my apartment. I guess the place that I'm the most comfortable writing is in my bedroom at my desk, because I have like my noise canceling headphones on and I can, stand up and walk around and talk out loud to myself without worrying about anybody seeing me be weird. So.
And Lona is wondering, where do you draw your inspiration from when you're developing characters?
Sometimes real people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes real people. Sometimes characters that I liked from a movie, and I'm like, oh, what if their personality was like a little bit like this, though? Yeah, it's all subconscious. I don't think I'm actively thinking about it when I'm writing characters. They kind of just come alive in the dialogue. When I'm writing dialogue is when I really realize what a character is like, and then I kind of just run with it. And in revisions, I'm like, okay, I need to like curtail them a little bit this way, but yeah.
And in terms of your process, are you someone who needs to outline the entire arc?
Yes, it depends how in depth I go, depending on the book. But I always need to know the beginning, the climax, and the ending. I always need to know the ending. And depending on how long I've had to think about the book, sometimes I will outline it beat for beat. And of course, when I'm writing, things inevitably change. But I am for sure an outliner.
And a question from Lee. What do you hope readers will feel when they read this book?
I always want to try to write books that, when you're finished reading it, you kind of just want to hug the book. I think that's kind of like the feel that I want to give. And I also kind of want, by the end, I want readers to feel a little swooned by the romance. And a little, light, hopeful. I think that that's sort of the nice thing about romance, is that it offers those things.
Ambraya would like to know, how has your taste in books influenced your writing?
I read a ton of romance novels.
Right.
I read a lot of romance novels, and I think that definitely helps me. And when I say romance novels, I mean like adult romance novels. That's like my go-to genre mostly. But a lot of the time when I am writing, I cannot read something that's similar to what I'm doing. So sometimes I find myself reading nonfiction, whatever I can do to like sort of try to get some kind of space from what it is that I'm working on. But I do read a ton of adult romance novels, and I definitely think it's a great It's been a great teacher to me. It's fun. It's like something I do for pleasure, but it also helps my work.
A few comments came in that I'd like to share. Someone says, this is so the book I needed right now, comfort reading and all that makes New York, New York. I miss it and being out and about. I think that's a really accurate description.
Same, yeah.
And a comment from Summer Dawn Laurie. I really enjoy seeing an illustrated cover for a YA novel. She feels like she's being exposed to a lot of photos on jackets, and there's so much warmth in both of your book covers.
Yeah, I'm Cassie to thank for that. I can't take credit.
Summer also would like to know, can we expect another new novel from you next summer? Fingers crossed.
Not next summer, but I hope to be able to say something soon.
Fair enough. Before we wrap up, I have a few final questions. Obviously, the film industry has taken such a hit right now, as have so many with the pandemic. But can you tell us, is there any possibility of a screen adaptation of the book?
Wouldn't that be nice? No,
I would
not
know.
right now.
Not
No, not right now. But maybe we'll see. I'll get lucky in that way. So I thought about the question about YA books to read.
Oh, great.
And so I kind of just stuck to YA romance a little bit. So I'm sorry. But I wrote Everything by Nicola Yoon.
Yes.
If You Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson. Lola and the Boy Next Door by Stephanie Perkins. And if you like fantasy, I actually don't even know if this is like necessarily considered fantasy, but like it kind of is. The Winners series, the Winners trilogy by Maria Verkowski, I think is absolutely brilliant. And if you like fantasy, I think that's a great rec.
All great picks. And just pie in the sky question, have you given any thought to who you would like to see in a possible movie? Like, who would you envision playing Evie or her grandmother?
Gigi's a hard one. I haven't thought about Gigi. No, that's not true. There's this actress named Lynn Whitfield who, one of my favorite movies is this movie called Eve's Bayou, and Lynn Whitfield plays Eve's mother. She's just like very beautiful, beautiful, classy woman. Evie, I don't know. The other day I was doing an interview and they asked me this question and I said China McClain, who is this actress who's on this show called Black Lightning. I kind of just blurted her name and then I was like, oh, that works. So I've kind of just been going with that. But the other day I was tagged in this Bookstagram where a blogger did her own fan casting, and the person that she cast for Milo was this actor named Aubrey Joseph, I think was his name. And he's on this show called Cloak, I think, on Freeform. And I looked, after she tagged him, I looked at the picture and I looked him up and I was like, yeah, this checks out. So those two.
Excellent. Well, I think there's a lot of meat in those roles should an adaptation actually happen.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Finally, can you tell us what's on tap for you next?
More romances. That's always a guarantee.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Christina. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to everyone watching at home. Once again, I've been speaking with Christina Forrest about her new YA novel, Now That I've Found You. The book is out August 25th from Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. A few final announcements. Join us on September 2nd for our next event featuring Judith Little. She'll be talking about her new novel, The Chanel Sisters. And for a reminder about that and other events in the series coming up, sign up at publishersweekly.com/booksontap live. Hope to see you then.